I hate divorce. Let me say it again for those of you in the back. I hate divorce. Yeah, I said it. What you gonna do about it? Nothing. But do you know what I hate even more than divorce? Marriage. Most of you are probably like, wait, what? I thought if he hated divorce, that means that he must absolutely love marriage. Uh-uh. Wrong. The other half of y'all are like, whew, I hate my marriage too. Glad to know I ain't alone in this, child. Ugh. But listen, I don't hate marriage for the reasons you may suspect. I don't hate my wife. I'm not a disgruntled spouse, nor are there any major problems in my marriage. I actually have a truly excellent wife. So let's clap for her because she inspired this hatred for marriage. You guys have absolutely no idea what's going on here, do you? Well, that's the point. My wife and I have come to a couple of conclusions about why people get divorced. And many of those reasons have absolutely nothing or very little to do with what is cited on their divorce decrees. So let's name out a few reasons people often cite for getting divorced. Let me hear you. Yep, infidelity, that's one. Finances, yep, I think that's number one. We fell out of love, yeah. Abuse, yeah, that's unfortunately. Irreconcilable differences, yep, that's definitely one. Oh, his secretary. I guess he better call Tyrone. Yep, him get his. Oh man, all of those are good examples, but they aren't good reasons. What do I mean by that? Well, I'm glad you asked because I've been standing here all of this time waiting for you to ask me that question. These examples aren't good reasons because they are good results, meaning that every quote unquote reason cited previously is actually a result of something deeper that happened in the marriage or was sometimes rooted or planted long before the couple ever got married. However, before the divorce ever even happened, the couple, all giggly and excited, said, I do. I love her. I do. But I have a question for anyone that's ever been divorced. How long did it take you to get divorced? Probably several months, right? And you had to seek out legal counsel, right? And you had to go through a process of the court system, right? And you had to sift through who was going to get what and how things would be appropriately divided, right? And then you had to wait some more on the case. And then you had to wait some more. When the divorce was finally over, you still had to wait some more months before you could legally get with your side piece. Now, let me ask you another question. How long did it take you to get married? Think about it. Your marriage or your life commitment only took as long as you wanted it to take. Some people wanted to wait a year to get married. Some people married their spouse after only knowing them for a short while. However, in many of these cases of marriage, there was very little to no process or preparation for the marriage. Most of the process and preparation was for the wedding, not the marriage. And herein lies the problem with marriage, which leads me to my first point in this failure to plan, which is a lack of service. The very first problem with marriage is a lack of service. Everybody in the marriage is only about me, me, me. And this ain't the hokey pokey, so this is not what it's all about. All right. So let's examine what the marriage vows say. They say, I take you to be my lawfully wedded spouse to have and to hold for richer and poorer, better and worse, sickness and health till death do us part. You know what's interesting is that most of us are already in violation of what we submitted to. So let's take those first three words. I take you. This is an accepting role. This means that I am accepting of you. This means that I am taking you on. I am here to service you. I am here to service you when you're rich and when you're poor and when you're sick and well and on and on and on and on and on and on. But what we often do is we get mad when things go wrong and we say things like, what about me, man? I don't even want you if you sick. And if you ain't got no money, we ain't got no marriage. Man, has anyone ever seen the marriage movie called Fireproof? Do you remember the scene in the kitchen where the husband and wife are standing there and they are bickering and arguing? Have you ever taken time to pay attention to the details of that scene? They are both making their individual points and raising very valid concerns. But the one thing that I think that many of us missed is the fact that both place the emphasis on themselves. They both, in some form or fashion, said me, in the form of saying me, I, or my, well over 20 times. Now, that may not mean much to you right now, but the significance of this point is that the scene was only about 3 minutes long. So, with that being said, let me ask you another question. How many times have you said, what about me? What about my? What about I? In the course of a 3-minute argument with your spouse? This indicates that your attention or your focus is not on that of your spouse, but more on yourself. And when we focus more on ourselves, the what about me and my needs and what I want and blah, blah, we tend to lose focus on our spouse. And that, my friends, is what we call pride. Yep, pride. And what's at the center of the word pride, audience? Whoa. I'm not at the center of your pride. It's you, silly. You guys are such prudes. Pride causes us to lose sight of what we committed to in the first place, which is to take and accept and serve our spouse. Unfortunately, when pride has crept in, we often do the opposite and reject them and ultimately squeeze them out of our marriage. However, what we must remember is that marriage is about two people coming together as one. The uncomfortable thing about marriage is that though marriage is not about the me and the my and the I of pride, it is about what you can do to begin the healing process of your marriage. Contrary to popular belief, your marriage is not necessarily about your spouse and what he or she may be doing wrong or may be doing right. When you begin to do what you are supposed to do, what will often happen is that your spouse will begin to take notice. You may not even know that or even realize that they are noticing you. They will often take notice and begin to mimic you. Something I like to call the mirror effect. Meaning, what do I see in me via you? When I look at you, I should see a reflection of me because we are no longer two, but one. Even the government acknowledges us as one when we file our taxes jointly. We are considered one, not two, but one. So this oneness needs to be exemplified in our marriage. You should serve the needs of your spouse as that of a good waiter or a good waitress. Have you ever been to your favorite restaurant and the waiter approaches you with a smile and they ask you if you'll be having your usual, your eggs over easy, your 2 slices of bacon, and a cup of coffee with 2 cream and 1 sugar? What happened? They anticipated your needs and did so with a smile to express their happiness to serve you. When you were finished with your meal, you hopefully left them with a generous tip or gratuity or some expression of your gratitude for their willingness to serve you. Your expression was a reciprocation of what they had done. And the next time you come to that restaurant, that waiter will be knocking the other wait staff over to get to your table because they become protective over you because you have met their needs. And you show your protectiveness of them by requesting them. But often what happens in marriage is that my needs aren't being met because all you care about is you. And when I realized that all you care about is you, I began to mirror you and only care about my needs. So now the two, which are supposed to be one, are now back at two again. And what does two represent in a marriage? Division. Let me say it another way: divorce. Which brings me to my second subject: a lack of focus. Why do people generally divide or divorce? It is generally due to a lack of focus on one or two things, God or spouse. As it relates to the lack of focus on your spouse, in order to have vision and see something that you're trying to see, you have to be focused or zoned in on that thing. The reason that most of us divide or divorce is often due to a lack of zoning in on our spouse. Again, we generally have a tendency to focus more on ourselves than that of our spouse. Now, this isn't to say that we shouldn't show ourselves love or care and appreciation, or that we should allow people to just walk all over us. That is not the purpose of this statement. But it is to, again, reiterate that marriage is not all about you, but it is about what you can do to strengthen the focus on your spouse. Because remember, you are a mirror. And if you are only focused on you, then when your spouse gazes over at you, then all they see is you caring only about your wants and your desires. So, what do you think I see? I no longer see us, but myself. Remember that the law of reciprocation is always in effect. So if you only care about you, then more than likely, I am only going to care about me. So when you begin to see that your spouse is going outside of the marriage to get their needs met, whether it be in the form of another person, working more, picking up extra hobbies that don't include you, drugs, alcohol, or whatever, it should come as no shocker to you, because if you did little or nothing to fix you and your focus on your spouse and the marriage, then the lack of focus will often cause the original vision of the marriage to become obscure. And what we used to see in each other, we are now searching for in other arenas. So we have to take responsibility to break the cycle of selfishness, or that selfish, or the things that we do that only revolves around ourself and have a tendency to make us become more self-centered. Again, our main focus should be on that of God and our spouse. Remember the waiter? When you serve well, your spouse will be more poised to show gratitude or gratuity to you. When you serve your spouse well, they will often reciprocate with the same or even greater gesture, which fulfills your needs and leads to you wanting to do more for them. And the cycle continues of each of you attempting to outserve the other. And when your focus is on me, then I can see clearly now who you truly are, and I can become better because when I look at you, that's who I want to see in me. Then there's the focus factor of God. There has to be something larger than the two of you that knits the two of you together. Because sometimes, even in our best attempts to serve our spouse, things can fall through the cracks or get misinterpreted or miscommunicated. And you need a higher power to intervene on your behalf. For instance, Whenever there is a conflict between my wife and I don't always know the answer of how to remedy it. Sometimes I have to stop and self reflect and think of things that I may have done wrong, because if it was indeed my fault, then I want to be the one that corrects it. So sometimes I have to ask God to show me what's wrong with me, because I don't want to be angry at her when the problem is me. However, when the problem is her or it's us, then we need someone greater than us to intervene on our behalf. Do you remember the day you got married and there was a minister or a judge or a rabbi or a preacher or whoever? Their position was to physically represent God in joining you two together. Marriage is not a two-way street, it is a triangle. It is a triangle where all sides are connected. And if one of your proverbial eyes is always focused on God and the other eye is always focused on your spouse, then it becomes very difficult to see the distractions of outside interferences. Ladies, it is really difficult to focus on your husband when your focus is on Tim or John at work. Husbands, it's really hard to focus on Susie from the gym when you're focused on God. I messed you up with that one, huh? If your true focus is on God, it's really difficult to focus on Susie. However, if your focus is on Susie, it's really, really hard to focus on God. Which brings me to my last point, which is a lack of heart. Do you know that the physical aspect of your heart powers your entire body? You could literally get shot in the head and technically still be alive as long as your heart is beating. But if you get shot in the heart, then it's going to be a whole bunch of sad singing and flower bringing. Everything is over. It's done. You can kill it. It's done. All right. Which is why I don't like to make the comparison to heart with love. I personally don't think you love with your heart. And what I mean by that is when people say that, man, we just fell out of love, they generally don't mean that they don't care that if the person dies today, then, oh, well, whatever. Nor do I think that they mean that their heart isn't in it anymore. It's just that I truly don't like the actions that represent you anymore. You did something that compromised the level of trust and intimacy that we once shared. But when your heart is attached to something and your spouse hurts you to that degree, your heart hardens. And everybody knows that if your physical heart hardens, then it can no longer pump blood to the necessary areas and keep you alive. So let's apply that same concept to marriage. When you have a hard heart due to infidelity, consistent lying, abuse, or any number of things that may have happened, then it's plausible to understand that the life that once flowed through the marriage will begin to shrivel up and ultimately die. This is why I personally believe that the caveat of till death do us part is not always associated with the physical aspect of death. I think that when your heart is hardened, then that is a sign or symbol of death to the marriage. It is really difficult to get someone to express their symbol of love towards you when they are one step away from hatred of you because their heart is no longer in it. When your heart is no longer in it, then I guess that's when it's most appropriate to say that we fell out of love, but that's not really a falling. That's more of a stopping, which is why I don't associate falling out of love with stopping of love. Because if you ask most people after they have divorced, do you still love Sam? What they'll usually tell you is that they still love him, they just don't like him. So when that is the case, then that's the former married person's association or their verbiage with we fell out of love. But the actuality is that you fell out of like with him or her. Now, like is the blood that flows through the body of the marriage. Love, on the other hand, is the heart or the muscle that pumps like through the body of the marriage. So when the nutrients of what we learned before, that of service and proper focus that are needed to keep like flowing, stops being taken into the body of the marriage, then it becomes very, very difficult for like to flow freely. This unfortunately dries up the flow and ultimately gives the heart nothing to pump through. Then the heart stops. There are very few things that can revive a heart matter. It takes a whole lot more effort to revive a hardened heart than a dozen roses and good intentions, fellas. I'm sorry. So I associate falling out of love with the brain aspect or the mind aspect because your heart is still in it. It is still connected. It is still in some way attached. But you can't think about your spouse because of whatever it is that they did or failed to do. You don't like them, but you do love them. This is why divorcing them appears to be an easy out until you see them with someone else and it pulls on that heartstring. Yeah. Because the heart is still attached. It was your mind that left, not your heart. But when there is a lack of heart in the marriage, then it is hard for like to flow through the veins of the marriage. Like is what keeps your marriage vibrant and moving and fun. So when your heart stops, then the marriage is likely to stop as well. So which are you? Are you lacking heart or are you lacking like? Because once you answer that question, there you will find the answer to the problem with marriage. Thank you.